Hello and welcome to this InfoReady Review webinar. Over the next hour, we'll hear from Claire Chenot from Thomas Jefferson University. She'll share how the Jefferson Clinical Research Institute protects the time of early career researchers. This isn't just vital for their careers, it's vital for the future of the institution. And the selection of promising researchers for this special protected time and resources is powered by InfoReady Review. So let's join this webinar as it's about to begin.
Thanks for taking the time to join us for today's Peer Spotlight webinar. It's a strange time, so the fact that you're joining us, really appreciate it. Today's Peer Spotlight webinar features our guest panelists from Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, Claire Chenot. Claire is a program manager at the Jefferson Clinical Research Institute, so JCRI for short. You may hear that acronym a couple times during the call. So some of the topics Claire will be discussing today not only include how their processes are managed in InfoReady Review, but also the general approach taken by JCRI to support early career researchers. And also, measuring those outcomes of the program and how they move forward.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. Hopefully, we're all settled in at home. Like Carlos said, I'm a project manager at the Jefferson Clinical Research Institute at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of the ways we support our researchers here, and I'll try to focus most of today on the internal funding mechanism that we've just launched, which provides protected time for our early career researchers here at Jefferson. Next. So before I start, I wanted to give a little background about the Jefferson Enterprise. The Jefferson Enterprise is comprised of Jefferson Health and Thomas Jefferson University. Jefferson Health is made up of 14 hospitals throughout the wider Philadelphia area and continues to expand. Sometimes it seems like every day. As you can see in this graphic, our hospitals include several specialty hospitals, such as the Hospital for Neuroscience and McGee Rehabilitation Hospital, and also includes the NCI designated Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center. Next. Thomas Jefferson University, the other arm of the Jefferson Enterprise, is comprised of 10 colleges and 4 schools. With the acquisition of Philadelphia University in 2017, Thomas Jefferson University really runs the full gamut of different degrees and majors, undergrad all the way through med school. The colleges related to clinical care are located in the Center City campus of Philadelphia. The takeaway here is really that the Jefferson Enterprise is quite large already and continues to grow rapidly. Hopefully that provides some context for the rest of today's discussion. Next. Okay, so before I get into the nitty-gritty of the early career grant we rolled out late 2019, I first want to give you some background on the research environment here at Jefferson and try to build a case for why leadership thought this funding mechanism would help support our junior faculty. So we all know that strong research productivity is important for many reasons. For one, to be considered a premier institution, of course, a high research output is essential. But beyond that, conducting clinical trials provides an opportunity to advance and improve clinical care. And we at Jefferson, and I'm sure your institution as well, we really see it as our duty to contribute to that mission. So I'll give some background about how we're ensuring that research stays a top priority as we continue to expand the enterprise, and how this grant specifically addresses that. We'll then get into the specifics of the grant and how we facilitated the use of InfoReady throughout the process. And finally, we'll talk about lessons learned and next steps for this award specifically, but I'll also touch on some of the ideas we're considering for implementation on a wider scale throughout the enterprise in the future. Next. So pictured on the left here are various factors in our world today that can sort of contribute to a decreased or a suppressed research output in academia. You may all be familiar with the increased trial cost, the decreased level of federal funding, and the so-called regulatory burden of performing research. But mergers and reimbursement models should also be considered when evaluating barriers to conducting research in a large enterprise. As I mentioned just a second ago, Jefferson is a huge enterprise and is continuing to expand. A lot of our expansion is focused on acquiring area hospitals. To be clear, this expansion is a good thing, but as you add additional stakeholders to an institution, it is important to be aware of the varying priorities the new affiliates have as you're all joining together. You can sort of picture it as a ratio. So before a merger and acquiring a new hospital, there was a 1-to-1 ratio of research to clinical care. Perhaps after the addition of a new community hospital with no research activity, there's now a 1-to-2 ratio of research to clinical care. The second challenge is the focus on relative value units for clinicians and how to ensure there is reimbursement or recognition for research activities. RVUs are generally concrete and can be planned for. So here's a list of clinical care activities for which you are reimbursed by a third-party payer. A clinician can see X number of patients per day and perform XYZ number of different procedures per week. We can calculate that, we can track that, we can try to scale that up. Meanwhile, compared to research, the financial impact isn't always so quote unquote cut and dry. Sometimes research activities can take years to bring money into an institution and often require financial support from the institution before that. So it's understandable that sometimes there might be some resistance to taking on that risk or initial investment for a new research program. Lastly, with mergers of academic medical centers and clinical-only sites, there is a risk of siloing these different pursuits. At first glance, this might not seem too bad. Maybe it's good for people to specialize in one thing or the other, but it could potentially create issues or problems when leadership comes together to create a strategic plan for the entire enterprise. What you don't want is there to be sort of a research versus clinical care competition. So to address those potential concerns, Jefferson's leadership has done a really good job in planning for and including new sites in the research mission. The goal is to create buy-in for research activity at all new sites and also provide them with the tools they need to hit the ground running as new members of the Jefferson community. Next. So what enterprise leadership has done is create research processes between the academic, clinical, innovation, and institutional advancement pillars of the Jefferson Enterprise. These processes establish enterprise-wide administration and management of research activities. What leadership is really shooting for here is a turnkey style of operations. So a new site comes on and they already have all the resources they need to conduct a clinical trial or clinical research if that's something they want to pursue. So really trying to eliminate that barrier to create new processes or identify SOPs in leadership. So this includes a clear delineation of responsibilities for all our research support offices, and it really encourages and seeks buy-in from all of Jefferson's sites. Next. One of those research support services is the Jefferson Clinical Research Institute, which is the office I work in. JCRI provides a variety of services. Some are required and others as needed. So for example, all clinical research that occurs at Jefferson would likely need to work with our contracting systems and training team. However, they might not need the regulatory or project management support if maybe it's a smaller project or if they have the staff in place who can handle those processes on their own. I wanted to go over my office specifically because I think it really shows how Jefferson has created a really great institute that allows for the quick adoption of new strategic initiatives. So when something new needs to be developed for research support, it can typically fall into one of these categories. So when enterprise leadership decided to introduce new and expand existing internal funding mechanisms, the question of who would manage the new workload was pretty clear: the project management team. And so any sort of new initiative, training, or education endeavors there's a team already in place and identified who can sort of take on that work. Next. Here are some of the specific initiatives we've rolled out at Jefferson to provide support for researchers, including continuing education opportunities, funding opportunities, and a clinical research support community, which serves as a centralized hub for all things clinical research. This hub has been really great in serving as a one-stop shopping for investigators and coordinators, particularly those who are new to Jefferson, new to their career. It outlines all the different systems and processes that we use here, and we get about 1,500 views per month on that. Under funding opportunities, you can see the GEMS Award. That will be the focus of the rest of today's presentation. The Provost Pilot Award is a few years old now and provides support for the collection of pilot data to be used for larger clinical trials and grant submissions. And the Pediatric Award is also an interesting way that we've used to facilitate cross-campus collaboration between Nemours and Jefferson. Next. Okay, so to get into this Junior Faculty Award, which we'll be discussing more closely for the rest of this presentation. So the Jefferson Emerging Medical Research Support, or GEMS Junior Faculty Award, is our latest internal funding endeavor. A lot of internal awards focus on funding project materials, but not salaries. So maybe a coordinator salary, patient reimbursement, and stuff like that, but not doesn't provide typically protected time. And then with that pilot data in hand from those, typical internal funding mechanisms, the investigator is then able to apply for external funding, which will provide that protected time in the future. This award is kind of the opposite of that and gives 20% protected time for 2 years for those researchers who already have a funded project. The reason we're focusing on salary support for this is that many early career researchers can find themselves between a rock and a hard place. The rock being the need for time to get pilot data, and the hard place being the need to have pilot data to get that protected time. So it's kind of a push and pull there. And then when we think specifically about clinician scientists, there's also the additional need to balance clinical schedules with the time they need to collect and analyze that pilot data. So the aim of this award was to help remove both the rock and the hard place for some of the most promising early career researchers to really try to help expedite the growth of their body of research. Next. So the eligibility requirements for this award. The project must meet the NIH definition of clinical research, so patient-oriented research, epidemiological studies or behavioral studies, outcomes research, and health services research. So we were pretty strict about that. The applicant must have held the title of instructor or assistant professor and been within their first 5 years of appointment at Jefferson. The project must have active financial support. We verified this through our Office for Research Administration. And we also asked that they identify a mentor in their selected area of expertise. We did not require that the mentor be a Jefferson employee, but in those cases, we did ask that they specifically address the nature of that relationship and how it would occur off campus and in their application materials. Next. Okay, so now I'm going to break down the application requirements and what the purpose of each requirement was. So we asked for a one-page personal statement that described the candidate's long-term goals and demonstrated a compelling case for why the funds were needed to maintain productivity. We asked that a career development and mentoring plan be attached, which should include projected milestones for project completion over 2 years, a detailed list of deliverables that would be generated, and a schedule of mentorship meetings. We didn't provide a very strict outline of this mentorship plan. We kind of wanted to see what people would come up with and let them sort of, create it in whichever way best fit their specific mentoring plan. Applicants were also asked to provide letters of support from their mentor and department head so we could verify buy-in and support from their department and mentor. We asked for the bio sketches of both the mentor and the applicant so that we could evaluate the productivity of the mentor in addition to the applicant's potential for success. Since this grant's goal is to fast-track a research career, we wanted to ensure that the mentor had experience securing external funding and maintaining a high productivity level in addition to evaluating the applicant themselves. And so although this grant provides salary support, we did ask for a 5-page research plan so that we could understand the project better and verify that that project had a high potential for securing external funding and development. Next. So using InfoReady, JCRI was put in charge of managing this new award, and Jefferson already had the InfoReady platform, which was used mostly in the past for institutionally limited funding opportunities, which are processed through another office. So when we started taking on some of these internal, and when I say we, I mean JCRI, when we started taking on these internal funding mechanisms, I really wanted to find a way to streamline that process, the administrative burden specifically on managing these grants. So exploring InfoReady seemed like a really good way to move everything onto this cloud-based system and manage the documents all through there. So all aspects of this award, except the decision letters, were processed through the InfoReady system, specifically to decrease administrative burden, and second to that, hopefully we thought it would streamline the process for the applicants and the reviewers. Next. So InfoReady is highly customizable and to me pretty intuitive, but there is definitely a learning curve, and creating an application form in InfoReady can take more work than just listing the requirements on a Word doc or a website. The platform saves so much time after submission. So if you build out your form correctly, you can add character or word limits so you don't need to manually check that. You can download spreadsheets of all the scores so you don't need to manually enter those and calculate those. The reviewer fills it out and it goes right to a spreadsheet. You don't need to check for missing information because you can mark fields as required, so there's no risk of an applicant sending you an application and you realizing that they forgot to attach this or fill out this question, because InfoReady will sort of flag that and make them add that information. There's no forwarding submission materials to reviewers and risk having that get lost in a busy inbox. So the reviewers are able to go to their dashboard and see, which probably a lot of you are familiar with those processes too. But it really did save us so much time processing these, and we were able to do it more rapidly than if we were doing it quote unquote by hand. On the other hand, you can also kind of make the form more simple, so you don't have to build it out that advanced. You can still have applicants attach Word documents, PDFs, and things like that directly into the form. So it's really, you can get as much or as little, I guess you could say, out of the InfoReady form. So it's been nice. Next. So getting the applicants to go to the InfoReady system was also something that I really wanted to make sure happened. So I didn't want the requirements for the grant all over the place. I didn't want any applicants sending me materials and me adding them to the InfoReady system myself. So the RFA and all subsequent reminders included a general description and an eligibility for the grant, but it directed everyone to the InfoReady page to get the full submission details and requirements. So again, my idea there was to sort of minimize that document management of having all the requirements in different places. So instead of listing all the requirements out on the MyJeff Hub, clinical research community, and the website or anything like that, they were all just in InfoReady and directed everyone there. We included the contact information for questions for myself in each email and announcement and on the InfoReady page, so people could still reach out to me for clarification and still have that sort of human contact. Most of the questions were related to the eligibility, but I did receive a few questions troubleshooting InfoReady, you know, people trying to submit and they'd call me and they had an error, and then I'd be able to pull it up and see that it looked like they forgot to save a document or enter a field, and kind of walk through some questions like that. So I would say it is important to have someone who can quickly respond and is able to troubleshoot via email and phone if you're going to be processing something strictly through InfoReady and having those applicants use the system 100% themselves. Next. And then supporting the reviewer's use of InfoReady was a sort of similar process, but there's a few other sort of details there. We did tell reviewers in advance that we'd be doing all of the reviews online through this cloud-based system. So just kind of getting them primed for that and ready to know that they wouldn't be emailing me their reviews. One thing we did do, however, was provide the reviewer guidelines as a Word document in addition to having them listed out in InfoReady. This was really to support any reviewers who would prefer to print out those applications and sort of do it by hand, so they could have a one-pager of the reviewer guidelines next to them on their desk, just to help facilitate their process if they need it. I don't know how many people did that, but we just wanted to provide that extra level of support. The same sort of troubleshooting was provided to the reviewers as it was for applicants. So, you know, I had a few reviewers call me when they were setting up their account, or a question on how to enter this, or after they submitted their review needing to change a score, and I went in and helped them do that kind of thing. But overall, the reviewers found the process really seamless, and there weren't very many problems navigating the system. Next. The overview of the submission overview for this GEMS award. We had 19 applications initiated and 13 applications ultimately submitted. 11 met all qualifications for review. One application didn't meet the NIH definition for clinical research. It was more basic bench science. And then one was seeking project, not salary funding, so didn't really address the RFA in that way. We chose to then discuss the top 5 applications after calculating the summary scores in an in-person council meeting, and 3 individuals were selected for funding based on the reviewer score and subsequent council discussion. Next. So outlined here, and I won't go into too much detail, but I wanted to provide this for everyone in case anyone wants to maybe model a grant similar to this at their own institution. I wanted to provide the reviewer categories for you guys. We scored 1 through 9, with 1 being the highest and indicative of an exceptional submission. Sort of, you know, the same scale that you use for an NIH grant, even though the application itself is a little different. We wanted to kind of keep that standardized. So we had a candidate evaluation where we assessed the potential for success of the applicant as a clinician researcher themselves. We evaluated the mentorship plan, the overall need for funds, including personal circumstances that, you know, in the work life that might compete with research responsibilities. And then we also assessed the research project. Next. So after review, we sent out stylized letters to inform applicants of the decision of their award. So we didn't use the InfoReady notification system because I wanted to let applicants know the decision of their award on our letterhead with signatures from the vice provost and things like that. So a really nice official letter. So we did that. We had a letter informing them of their decision. We included reviewer feedback in those award letters. And for those who weren't selected for funding, we also provided a list of resources that might help with future success, you know, if they want to apply for this award again or any other internal funding mechanism in the future. So those included grant writing and editing services that we offer here at Jefferson, other internal funding opportunities that might be coming up, links to our writing for publication workshops, and then also the NIH BioSketch guidelines and best practices, because they have a lot of great tools there. That being said, we still processed the awards decisions through InfoReady on the back end. We just didn't notify applicants through InfoReady. The idea being that InfoReady has and they're continuing to introduce a lot of monetary tracking type abilities in the system. So we want to make sure that we're adding the dollar amounts that were awarded and rejecting and accepting the different awards through InfoReady, so that way in case we ever want to go back and run those numbers, we can. We're also going to manage the progress reports through InfoReady. These are some of the things that we're going to include, and we're not sure if we're going to ask all the applicants to provide us this information, or if there's a way we can go on the administrative end and find some of this information ourselves. So for example, our IRB continuing review applications ask for a lot of this information that's listed here already. We also have access on the back end to see how many grants they've been funded and stuff like that. So we're thinking about trying to take some of that off of the investigator and maybe use our resources to find that information out ourselves to try to remove some of that burden while still balancing the fact we want to know if these grants are leading to future success. So these are some of the things that we are thinking about asking for in the future progress reports. We'll also ask for statements from the mentor and department chair that outlines how the funding has affected the growth and development of the department and the individual themselves. Next. So lessons learned and changes we might make in the future. There was a high interest in this type of funding. We only really advertised this award for a couple of months, and there was a lot of people that reached out who were interested who did not qualify, so basic researchers. So we kind of forwarded that feedback on to you know, the appropriate parties at Jefferson who are more involved with the basic research. So maybe they can, you know, offer something like this in the future. But it seemed like everyone was very interested in this type of award. Also in the future, we'll probably provide a little more support for reviewers and make sure that everyone is aware of how to review grants. So there was a few instances where people were a little unfamiliar with reviewing grants themselves. We're also considering providing a more defined mentorship plan, sort of a template for the next round of funding. I think overall, most people did a really good job providing a really detailed and defined mentorship plan. And we did kind of want to leave it open-ended in that way so people could really customize it, but we're thinking about providing maybe a good example or a template for people to use in the future, just so to make it a little easier on the applicants. Next. And then I wanted to touch on, lastly, a few next steps that we'll be taking on a broader scale at Jefferson to help support our researchers. We're looking at building sort of a quote unquote research report card, which would include the different studies researchers have conducted or are conducting, enrollment activity, number of publications, you know, and then what we'll use that for, I think we'll decide in the future, maybe recognizing some contributions of researchers in a monetary way. If they have a great research report card, could be one way. Maybe it could be a tool for tenure. You know, who knows? There's a lot of possibilities, or just for our own personal knowledge and to justify increasing internal funding. We think this could be a good way to sort of build a case for that. This first round of awards is really successful, and we're gonna look and see what the progress reports tell us, but there's a possibility that maybe in the future we'll expand these sort of early career internal funding mechanisms. We're also looking to integrate all of the clinical research with practice, so building more forms into Epic that align with different research activities so it's streamlined and all the systems kind of talk to each other. And then also, you know, like I kind of touched on earlier, how figuring out more ways to recognize those non-clinical contributions of providers. So that's it. And oh, sorry, next. And now I'm open to take questions or answer any, you know, sort of thoughts that you guys might have.
Thanks, Claire. Lots of great information there. There's a lot of thought put into rolling out all of the resources for supporting your researchers at Jefferson. So it was pretty enlightening.
Thank you.
For everyone on the phone, Claire's contact information is displayed on the screen in case you have questions after this. But we're here now, so let's answer the questions that were submitted. You ready, Claire?
I am ready.
All right, let's do this. So we have one question. I wanted to confirm some of the data you had. So, quote, applicants must be within 5 years of appointment at Jefferson, not within 5 years of first junior faculty appointment or within 5 years of fellowship completion.
Correct. So we did it with appointment at Jefferson. And that might change in the future. You know, this was the first year we did this, and we really kind of wanted to keep those guidelines as loose as we could to sort of facilitate that. So we didn't want anyone to not be able to submit an application because they had been an instructor in the past, but maybe didn't have a high research output or non-clinical research output at their previous institution. But if this, you know, becomes a super successful award in the future and we get, you know, 100 applicants, then maybe we'll need to narrow down some of that criteria. But for now, yeah, we kept it a little open.
Thank you. And by the way, I should mention this. We're open for questions, so if you do have any, type them into the chat box there. Some of you are already doing that. We got a couple questions related to reviewer selection. So, yeah, how did you select reviewers? And one, and then two, did you use any part of InfoReady to keep track of them in any way?
Sure. So the reviewer selection was pretty easy this time around because we just relied on our clinical research council to serve as our reviewers for this award, and the head of our research council assigned those awards himself. So he had great knowledge of everyone's different expertise and potential conflicts of interest, but we also asked our reviewers to identify any conflicts that we weren't already aware of when we were making those assignments. That council is comprised of various department heads and institutional heads, so like the head of the IRB, Jefferson Clinical Research Institute, Privacy Office, Operations, all have members on the Research Council, as well as colleges are also invited to nominate a member for the Jefferson Clinical Research Council. So those 14 colleges, any of those the clinical colleges were invited to appoint someone onto the council. And then through InfoReady, I did keep track of all the reviewer assignments there. So the head of the council made those initial matchups, and I went in through InfoReady and assigned everyone their reviewer selections through InfoReady. And on a day-to-day basis, I kind of went in and looked to see how many reviews were being submitted. And I also turned on the email notifications through InfoReady, so when reviews were complete, I was being notified as those were being done.
Thanks for sharing that. We always get lots of questions on working with reviewers. So no surprise they were asked right off the bat. So here's a couple questions that go back to the way you were promoting and marketing the opportunity.
Okay.
So, quote, what are the best ways to ensure the target audience sees the opportunity announcement? Unquote.
Okay, so at Jefferson, we are fortunate enough to have a research faculty listserv that is maintained by the provost office. So that's our main form of communications for things like this. So we send out emails letting everyone know that this award is available, and that goes to faculty and people involved in research. But beyond that, we also did a few things in addition to that. So we posted on our Research at Jeff Twitter page. I posted on that community page I kind of briefly touched on at the beginning of this presentation. I made a little graphic through Adobe Spark and posted up there to kind of grab people's attention and make them aware. We also had our marketing team put up throughout campus on these sort of screens that we have in various places across campus by like elevators and waiting rooms, sort of a slideshow. We had them add information about this award there. And so we kind of tried to hit it at as many angles as we could to try to get the most people aware. We also sent out, it was 3 emails total to remind people. Another thing I did for this award is I followed up with people who had initiated applications early on but hadn't completed their application closer to the due date to try to remind them that they had started this and maybe they wanted to complete it, but just to make sure they hadn't forgotten.
That last one's a good tip, because you have visibility in the system with drafts that have been started. So
yeah,
people get busy and sometimes things can slip through the cracks for them. So.
Exactly. And we've all been there.
Yeah, especially now with this disruption we're experiencing. There's another marketing question for you. In the future, how far in advance do you aim to announce this opportunity and others like it?
Sure. So, I mean, we now have this listed as this award is expected to be funded again for another year. We have it kind of vague right now. Expect applications to open up in the fall. And we did include that also in the not selected letters that we encourage you to reapply next year. We expect this to be funded again in the fall. And I'm kind of thinking late summer we'll start putting, some light advertisements out there or posting at places once we settle on a date. And then but at least 3 months in advance, I think we're going to do and send reminders on a monthly basis until the month of, and then start sending those reminders a little more frequently.
Right. Got another question about reviewers. Quote, is someone with a potential COI excused from reviewing or asked if they can remain neutral? Unquote.
If someone with a potential what now?
Conflict of interest.
A couple of mentors? Sorry, I can't quite understand you.
I'm sorry. The occupational hazard of using a cell phone. Is someone with a potential conflict of interest excused from reviewing or asked if they can remain neutral?
Yes. So if someone did identify a conflict of interest, so what we did was we assigned like 2 to 3 applications to each reviewer. So there was a couple instances where someone reached out and they're like, oh, actually, I am that person's department chair, and it was just overlooked. And so, okay, well, we reassigned that application to a different reviewer, and then they were still free to participate in the conversation, the discussion that happened with the council at large, but did disclose that relationship. So we could all take that into consideration.
Best of both worlds.
Yes. And it's hard because, for these internal grants, it's hard to get away from that conflict of interest because we're all at the same institution. So it's a little harder when it's an internal funding mechanism, I think, in general. So you do have to kind of balance it the best you can, but there's always going to be, a higher potential there in a way.
I totally agree. We have a couple questions about actually using InfoReady to set up the grant. So first question, quote, what were the key resources and help you used through InfoReady to set up this competition?
Okay, so InfoReady has a lot of really great videos that they have kind of outlined all the specific processes or buttons you need to hit, whatever you want to call it, to design their form the way you want it to be. So I used those a lot, and I know not everyone loves those training videos, but when you sit down and really do it, they do a great job of breaking down, like, click this button and this is what you need to do to make your form look this way, etc. I also reached out at least a few times to Carlos, I'm sure he remembers, to ask him more specific questions or ask him how I could manipulate the form this way. I wanted it to do this, and how did I do that? And so he always responded really quickly, and I think hopped on the phone with me at least once to troubleshoot with me. So InfoReady has a lot of tools. I also created, sort of quote unquote dummy forms to kind of mess around with and kind of see what happens if I do it this way. And then, I always felt more than welcome reaching out to the InfoReady team themselves.
Thanks for the kind words.
You're welcome.
Glad I could help you. So this another question related to setup. Quote, in hindsight, what are the most important steps when initiating a competition for the first time through InfoReady?
I would say the most important, looking back, the most important thing is to submit an application yourself and make sure that everything does make sense, and maybe have someone else in your office do it. So just go through the form and make sure everything is working out. Because I know there was, I forget what exactly it was, but I did have to change something on the reviewer, the applicant, and after the competition was already launched. And obviously that's not ideal because people might have, already moved forward or this and that in different steps. So then you have to kind of go back and let everyone know you changed this thing. So I would say go through and make sure that you have a couple people including yourself, go through and submit as an applicant and then as a reviewer too, to make sure all the kinks are worked out.
Good tip. Good tip. Then you're prepared.
Yeah.
So there's a couple questions with related to the approach for supporting faculty members. So the first question is, how do you identify early career faculty, and do you offer support to all or just those that seek help?
Just those that speak. What was the last two words there? Sorry.
All those that, do you offer support to all early career faculty or just those that seek help?
Okay, gotcha. So we have our training and education team actually does a great job providing just like blanket support to everyone, early career or not. And I know that if they haven't already launched, they're working on launching soon. Programming targeted specifically at early career researchers to introduce them to like the IRB process, how to build a research team and manage a growing sort of lab or body of work. And then for this award specifically, it's kind of a call to action for people to come in, and we send that out to everyone. So, let someone know if they fit this criteria in your department that they should apply, kind of thing. What else do we offer so far to early career researchers? We have this grant, but yeah, I think a lot of those more general services are through our training and education team. We also do provide, which is not necessarily for an early career researcher, but for any researcher, we offer like project management services, grant writing services, coordinator support, regulatory support. So that kind of is across the whole range of experiences, but early career included.
And so here's a question to distinguish types of faculty members. At what point is a faculty researcher no longer considered early career?
That's a good question, and I guess it's kind of at a certain point you're definitely on the cusp or straddling that line. And so for this award, we defined it as 5 years, but I think there's a blur there because you might not be considered a senior researcher after 6 years, maybe you're mid-career. So maybe breaking it down into 3 categories would be useful.
I think that makes sense. And then related to that, have you noticed any trends in what early career faculty say they need?
So I can speak to this a little bit, but I would defer probably to someone else to answer that question with it more fully. But it does seem like our early career researchers do need that salary support and protected time more than anything. And I've also heard that sentiment echoed in the bench science world too, that that's really important for them to be able to develop their body of research and not, get bogged down with whatever it is, teaching, tests, clinical visits, whatever they're doing outside of research can kind of end up taking priority and take away from them building up their research. I've also seen that the training and education that we offer and the coordinator support have also been really well received.
Oh, good. Yeah. People need to be taught sometimes what's available and shown, for sure.
Yeah.
Here is a question about program evaluation. So you mentioned that you were planning to use progress reports to collect information, but in general, what tools do you use for program evaluation?
So I think it really just depends on, what the program is, but certainly for this one, our goal is to increase external funding for our investigators. So we evaluate that by the number of dollars we're getting back. But if it's, or our researchers end up getting back. So, this could be defined as successful if we look back in 5 years and the people who got the GEMS award received X amount of external funding that more than made up for our quote unquote initial investment. But if it was something, other projects I work on, like grant writing, proposals and things like that, maybe success is defined as number of successful proposals, which maybe doesn't have, money tied to it as much, but success can be defined that way. So I think it just depends. And I'm sorry if that is too vague of an answer, but yeah, Excel to track sort of that kind of thing. And InfoReady is nice because it talks right to Excel, so you can track metrics really easily.
So thank you for the unprompted segue into another question we had. How did you use the reporting functionality in InfoReady is the question.
Sure. So for this award, I downloaded, if you go in and actually look at like the Excel sheet you can download, there's several different options they have, and I've looked at all of them and I sort of collate the different things I want. So like the reviewer name and project title, and then all the reviewer scores, add them, and then I can like add them all up in Excel. But it's nice because it keeps all that in InfoReady, and you can just re-download it as things change. And I do take it and make it like, a little nicer looking to put in a PowerPoint or whatever I'm using it for. But it's nice knowing that like it always lives there and I don't have to worry about keeping it in a shared drive or anything like that. And then in the future, we're wanting to keep track of those dollar amounts that I kind of mentioned earlier that we're giving out in InfoReady, so that way in a few years' time we can look at how much money we've spent on different types of grants and what departments, because applicants enter their department into InfoReady and things like that, and seeing like where we're giving our support from the institution to different departments. So we haven't, done a lot with that yet, but we're planning to in the future. So first steps to that is making sure that we're completing those fields as we go, so we don't have to go back and update later.
Thanks for sharing that. That reporting is always a question that comes up, and it's good to hear how individual institutions and individual administrators take the data out of the system. Regarding you being an administrator in the system, we actually had a question about co-administrators. Did you manage this program, this competition, on your own in InfoReady, or did you have co-administrators?
Yeah, so I administered it by myself. I did have the head of the research council as a co-administrator, just so he could see all of the different reviews and applications without me assigning him as a reviewer. But he didn't like mess around with the form or anything like that. That was just to provide that extra level of visibility to someone who needed that. But it was, yeah, I think it was pretty streamlined too, just having one person be in charge from my point of view. And then of course, as I was developing and building out the form, I did download PDFs of it and things like that and sent to people who might want to give input, and got their feedback and made changes as needed until, it was finalized. But one administrator, essentially.
Oh, good. Yeah, you're able to take care of everything by yourself.
Yeah,
That's helpful.
I think the main thing there is, when you get too many cooks in the kitchen and you're not keeping track of who made what changes or duplicating changes or having different points of contact, can just sometimes make things more confusing than they need to be.
Okay. So I think that is it for the question. If you have any questions for people at InfoReady directly, our contact information is on screen. And then with that, thanks again for your time. Stay safe and have a good week. Good day, everyone.